The harsh red and blue lights of the police cruiser flashed against the rain-streaked window of the Seattle apartment. Chloe stood frozen in the center of the living room. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Across the room, Evelyn was putting on the performance of a lifetime. The woman was sobbing into a silk handkerchief, her mascara perfectly smudged, playing the role of the terrified, exhausted stepmother to absolute perfection. The two police officers watched Evelyn with deep sympathy, jotting notes in their little black books. Chloe tried to speak, tried to tell them that she hadn't run away, that she had been locked out in the freezing rain on purpose. But the words died in her throat. She knew exactly how this would play out. In a few hours, Evelyn would call Marcus, Chloe's father, who was thousands of miles away on a cargo ship in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Evelyn would feed him another lie about his troubled, rebellious teenage daughter. And the most heartbreaking part of all was that Marcus would believe her. He always believed her. Chloe hugged her arms around her chest, feeling completely and utterly alone in a house that was supposed to be her home. The trap had closed, and there was no way out. Chloe's life had not always been this cold and terrifying. Her earliest memories were filled with the smell of pine needles, salty sea breeze, and the warm, comforting scent of fresh cinnamon rolls. She was raised in the small coastal town of Astoria, Oregon, by her fiercely loving Grandma Martha. Chloe's mother had passed away due to complications during childbirth. Her father, Marcus, was a chief engineer on massive commercial shipping vessels. Crushed by grief and completely terrified of raising an infant alone, Marcus had thrown himself into his work on the ocean, leaving baby Chloe in Martha's capable hands. Growing up in Astoria was like living in a gentle, sunlit dream. Martha was the center of Chloe's universe. She was a woman who spoke to her granddaughter like an equal, answering every endless question with patience and love. The neighborhood was a tight-knit community where doors were never locked. College's absolute favorite person, besides her grandmother, was old Mr. Henderson from across the street. He was a retired fisherman and a widower with a deep, rumbling laugh. When Chloe turned 7, Mr. Henderson brought down his dusty acoustic guitar from the attic. He placed it in her small hands, teaching her the basic chords. Chloe possessed a natural, raw talent. Music became her voice, her joy, her way of understanding the world. But that golden childhood shattered into a million unfixable pieces the day Grandma Martha collapsed from a sudden, massive heart attack. At just 10 years old, Chloe's world went dark. Marcus had to leave his beloved ocean to take his daughter to a sterile, high-rise apartment in downtown Seattle. He was a stranger to her, a tall, quiet man with sad eyes who paid the bills but had no idea how to talk to a grieving little girl. The transition to life in the massive grey metropolis of Seattle was brutally hard for Chloe. The apartment was located on the 20th floor of a glass and steel building. There were no trees to climb, no friendly neighbours bringing over pies, and no Mr. Henderson to play guitar with on a sunny front porch. Instead, there was the constant, muted roar of traffic and the endless patter of rain against the thick windows. Marcus tried his best, but his efforts were deeply awkward. He bought her expensive gadgets and trendy clothes, completely missing the fact that all Chloe really wanted was a hug and a conversation about her grandmother. He took a desk job at the shipping company's corporate office so he could be home every evening. But his mind was clearly always somewhere else. He missed the rolling waves of the Pacific. He missed the smell of diesel and sea salt. He missed the freedom of the ocean. They lived together like two polite strangers sharing a waiting room, carefully navigating around each other's grief without ever actually acknowledging it. To cope with the crushing loneliness, Chloe turned back to the only thing that made sense to her. She pulled her guitar out from under her bed. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, she sat on the edge of her mattress and began to play. Her fingers found the familiar chords Mr. Henderson had taught her. She closed her eyes and let the music wash over her. The sound of the strings filled the sterile apartment with a sudden, overwhelming warmth. When Marcus came home from work that evening, he stopped in the hallway, completely captivated by the beautiful, complex melody drifting from his daughter's room. He stood there for a long time, leaning against the wall, listening to the raw emotion pouring out of the instrument. For the first time since his wife died, Marcus felt a genuine connection to his child. He realized that this quiet, grieving girl possessed an incredible gift. That very week, he enrolled her in an elite music academy in the city. It was the first decision he made that actually brought a real, bright smile to Chloe's face. As Chloe threw herself into her music studies, she also began to take control of the domestic life in the apartment. Grandma Martha had taught her well. By the time she was 12, Chloe was a master in the kitchen. She grew tired of the endless stream of greasy takeout boxes and flavourless microwave meals that Marcus provided. One evening, Marcus unlocked the front door and was instantly hit by the mouth-watering aroma of roasted garlic, rosemary, and slow-cooked beef. He walked into the kitchen, his briefcase dropping to the floor in shock, to find his daughter pulling a perfect pot roast out of the oven. They sat down at the dinner table together. As they ate the delicious home-cooked meal, the icy walls between them finally began to melt. Marcus started talking. He told her stories about his travels, about the massive storms off the coast of Japan, about the glowing bioluminescence in the midnight waters of the Pacific. Chloe listened, her eyes wide with fascination. They were finally becoming a family. Despite their newfound connection, the call of the ocean was tearing Marcus apart inside. The corporate desk job was slowly suffocating him. He looked pale, tired, and deeply unfulfilled. He would spend hours staring out the apartment window at the Puget Sound, watching the massive cargo ships slowly drift toward the open sea. Chloe noticed this deep sadness in her father. She was older now, almost 13, and possessed a maturity far beyond her years. One evening, while washing the dishes together, she gently told him that he should go back to sea. She insisted that she was old enough to handle herself, that she could cook and manage the apartment. Marcus was incredibly touched by her understanding, but he immediately refused to leave her alone. Child Protective Services would never allow it, and more importantly, he could never forgive himself if something happened to her. If he was going to take a contract on a ship, he needed to find a live-in house manager. Someone responsible, caring, and capable of watching over a teenage girl for months at a time. The search for the perfect guardian turned into an absolute nightmare. Marcus interviewed dozens of candidates. There were young college students who were completely focused on their cell phones and had no idea how to cook a meal. There were strict, elderly women who looked at Chloe as if she were a wild animal that needed to be tamed. None of them felt right. Marcus was on the verge of giving up and declining the lucrative sea contract when his old college buddy, a wealthy logistics broker, invited him to a lavish dinner party at a downtown country club. Marcus went reluctantly, wearing an uncomfortable suit. He stood by the bar, sipping a scotch, feeling entirely out of place among the city's elite. That was when he saw Evelyn. She was stunning. Tall, elegant, wearing a sleek emerald green dress that caught everyone's attention. But it wasn't just her looks that drew Marcus in. She had a warm, deeply empathetic smile. They ended up sitting next to each other on a velvet sofa, and within an hour, they were talking as if they had known each other for years. Evelyn was a master of the emotional hook. Over a second glass of expensive wine, she lowered her voice and shared her heartbreaking life story. She told Marcus that she had recently gone through a devastating divorce. Her ex-husband, a wealthy real estate developer, had unexpectedly thrown her and her teenage daughter Brittany out onto the street. She claimed he had hidden his assets, leaving her penniless and desperate. She described how she had sacrificed her entire career to build a perfect home for her family, only to be tossed aside. Marcus listened, his heart aching for this beautiful, vulnerable woman. He immediately thought of his own tragedies. He saw a kindred spirit, someone who had been broken by life, but was still trying to be strong for her child. When Marcus mentioned his own dilemma, his desperate need for someone to live in his apartment and care for his daughter while he went to sea, Evelyn's eyes widened in perfectly rehearsed surprise. She reached out, gently touching his hand, and whispered that perhaps the universe had brought them together for a reason. The arrangement seemed like a miracle sent from above. Evelyn and her 16-year-old daughter, Brittany, moved into the spacious spare bedroom of the Seattle apartment. The first few weeks were an absolute dream. Evelyn transformed the dull bachelor pad atmosphere into a warm, vibrant home. She filled the vases with fresh flowers, bought expensive scented candles, and always greeted Marcus with a radiant smile when he came home from the office. For Chloe, the arrival of these two women was like stepping into a totally different universe. She had grown up surrounded by older people and practical clothing. Now, she had a glamorous stepmother figure and a cool, older stepsister. Evelyn and Brittany took Chloe under their wing. They whisked her away on weekend shopping sprees at the upscale downtown malls. They threw away her oversized, comfortable sweaters and replaced them with stylish, fitted clothes. They sat in front of brightly lit mirrors, teaching Chloe how to apply lip gloss and style her hair. For the first time in her life, Chloe felt beautiful. She felt like she belonged to a secret girls' club. Brittany, despite being 3 years older, acted like the protective big sister Chloe had always dreamed of having. They would sit on the living room rug late into the night, eating pizza while Brittany recounted dramatic stories about high school drama, popular boys, and social media trends. Chloe was totally mesmerized. She happily baked cookies and brownies for them, eager to contribute to this wonderful new family dynamic. Marcus watched all of this unfold with overwhelming joy. He saw his daughter laughing, looking stylish, and bonding with Evelyn. He was utterly blinded by the illusion. He fell deeply in love with Evelyn, believing she was the missing puzzle piece that would finally make his family whole again. After just 4 months of living together, Marcus proposed. It was a small, elegant ceremony at a downtown registry office, followed by a luxurious dinner at a waterfront restaurant. Chelsea wore a beautiful new dress, beaming with happiness. She finally had a mother figure. She felt safe. But the moment the ink dried on the marriage certificate, the countdown to the nightmare began. A month after the wedding, Marcus packed his heavy canvas duffel bags. He was heading out on a massive cargo vessel, bound for a 6-month route across the Pacific to Asia. Standing by the front door, he pulled Chloe into a tight, reassuring hug. The thick fabric of his jacket smelled of sea salt and old cologne. He kissed the top of her head, promising to call via satellite phone whenever he could. Then he turned to Evelyn, kissing her passionately, thanking her for holding down the fort. The heavy apartment door clicked shut behind him. The sound echoed through the hallway. Almost instantly, the atmosphere in the apartment changed. The warmth vanished, replaced by a freezing, suffocating tension. Evelyn's warm, loving smile completely dropped from her face, revealing cold, calculating eyes. She turned to Chloe, her voice devoid of any affection. She casually kicked over a pair of Marcus's boots and ordered Chloe to take them to the closet, then commanded her to start scrubbing the kitchen floor. The honeymoon was officially over. The mask had been ripped off. Within 48 hours, Chloe's life devolved into a grueling, Cinderella-esque nightmare. The weekend shopping trips and late-night pizza sessions completely stopped. Evelyn immediately fired the weekly cleaning service, loudly complaining about expenses, and pushed every single household chore onto Chloe's small shoulders. Before going to school, Chloe was forced to prepare a complex, hot breakfast for Evelyn and Brittany. After school, she had to vacuum the massive carpets, scrub the bathrooms until they shined, do all the laundry, and prepare a multi-course dinner. If a glass had a water spot, or if the dinner was 5 minutes late, Evelyn would unleash a torrent of cruel, sharp insults. She called Chloe ungrateful, lazy, and completely worthless. Brittany's behaviour completely flipped as well. The cool older sister vanished. Brittany treated Chloe like a personal maid, leaving wet towels on the floor, throwing dirty clothes across the room, and snapping her fingers when she wanted a fresh glass of water. Chloe was exhausted, her hands constantly smelling of harsh bleach and dish soap. The most devastating blow came a week into the new regime. Chloe, absolutely exhausted from scrubbing the baseboards, retreated to her room. She picked up her guitar, desperately needing the emotional release that music provided. She softly strummed a melancholic melody, finding a tiny shred of peace. Suddenly, her bedroom door flew open. Evelyn stood in the frame, her eyes blazing with irrational fury. She marched over, grabbed the neck of the guitar, and yanked it out of Chloe's hands. Evelyn screamed that the noise was giving her a migraine and that Chloe's childish hobbies were a pathetic waste of time. She locked the beautiful acoustic guitar in the hallway storage closet and kept the key. When Chloe begged for it back, crying that she needed to practice for her music academy classes, Evelyn coldly informed her that she had already called the school and cancelled Chloe's enrollment. The tuition money, Evelyn claimed, was better spent on Brittany's college prep courses. Chloe fell to her knees, sobbing. Her only escape, her only connection to her grandmother, had been completely severed. While Chloe was drowning in endless chores and emotional abuse, Evelyn and Brittany were living a life of absolute luxury on Marcus's dime. Evelyn spent her days at high-end day spas, getting expensive facials, massages, and professional blowouts. She would return home in the late afternoon, carrying shopping bags from designer boutiques, ignoring the fact that Chloe was wearing outgrown sneakers with holes in the soles. Brittany, completely unsupervised, began skipping her classes. She spent her time partying with a wealthy, reckless crowd from the city. She would stumble into the apartment at 3 in the morning, smelling heavily of stale cigarette smoke and cheap alcohol. Chloe was the one forced to clean up Brittany's mess, washing the smell of smoke out of the girls' jackets, so Marcus wouldn't find out during his video calls. Evelyn covered for her daughter perfectly. Whenever Marcus managed to call from the ship, the connection fuzzy and delayed, Evelyn would pull Chloe into the frame, wrapping a fake, loving arm around her shoulders, smiling brightly into the camera. painting a picture of total domestic bliss. Chloe tried desperately to tell her father the truth during those rare, brief phone calls. But Evelyn never left her side. The stepmother would stand just out of the camera's view, glaring at Chloe with a terrifying, threatening intensity. When Chloe bravely tried to whisper that things were bad, Evelyn immediately interrupted, laughing smoothly into the microphone. She would tell Marcus that Chloe was just acting out, struggling with typical teenage puberty hormones. She fed Marcus a constant, subtle poison. She claimed Chloe was refusing to do her homework, talking back, and acting entirely spoiled. Marcus, exhausted from working 12-hour shifts deep in the roaring engine room of the cargo ship, simply didn't have the energy to question it. He wanted peace. He trusted his wife. He would look at Chloe through the pixelated screen, his eyes filled with deep disappointment, and tell her to be respectful to Evelyn. Every time that happened, Chloe felt a piece of her heart break off. The man who was supposed to protect her was completely under the spell of a monster. The situation escalated drastically the weekend Brittany decided she wanted to go to a massive music festival in California. Evelyn had actually refused to fund the trip, not out of discipline, but because she had already maxed out the credit card on designer handbags. Enraged, Brittany completely lost her temper. That night, while Evelyn was sleeping, Brittany snuck into Marcus's home office. She figured out the combination to the emergency cash safe hidden in the bookshelf. Chloe, who was awake doing laundry, saw Brittany slipping a thick stack of $100 bills into her designer backpack. The next morning, Brittany was gone, leaving a vague note about staying with friends. When Evelyn discovered the safe was empty, the apartment exploded. Instead of blaming her own daughter, Evelyn immediately cornered Chloe. She grabbed Chloe by the arm, her manicured nails digging deep into the girl's skin, and screamed that she was a filthy little thief. Evelyn knew perfectly well who had taken the money, but this was the ultimate opportunity to permanently destroy Chloe's credibility with Marcus. When Marcus called that Sunday, the performance Evelyn delivered was worthy of an Academy Award. She was sobbing uncontrollably into the camera, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. She told Marcus that she was completely heartbroken, that she had tried everything to love Chloe, but the girl was out of control. She accused Chloe of stealing the emergency cash to buy drugs with a bad crowd. Chloe stood in the background screaming that it was a lie, that Brittany had taken the money. But Marcus couldn't hear the truth. He saw his beautiful wife in tears, and he saw his daughter shouting wildly. The optics were terrible. Marcus's face hardened into a mask of pure fury. His voice echoed through the laptop speakers, cold and furious. He told Chloe that he was profoundly disappointed in her, that she was disgracing her grandmother's memory. He officially grounded her for the rest of the year and told Evelyn to enact whatever discipline she saw fit. When the call disconnected, Evelyn turned to Chloe, a wicked, victorious smirk spreading across her face. She had won. Chloe was now completely isolated. With Marcus fully brainwashed and Chloe entirely broken, Evelyn began to execute the next phase of her plan. A new character entered the bleak reality of the apartment. His name was Julian. He was a slick, handsome man in his early 30s, always wearing expensive tailored suits that reeked of strong, musky cologne. Evelyn introduced him to Chloe as her distant cousin from out of state, claiming he was a lawyer helping her finalize the last messy details of her previous divorce. But even at 13, Chloe wasn't stupid. She saw the way Julian looked at Evelyn. It wasn't how cousins looked at each other. Whenever they thought Chloe was locked in her room, the dynamic between Evelyn and Julian shifted completely. They would stand far too close in the kitchen, whispering in hushed, urgent tones. Chloe caught glimpses of Julian running his hand down Evelyn's back, kissing her neck when they thought no one was watching. Evelyn was having a blatant, reckless affair right inside Marcus's home. And Julian wasn't just a lover. He was an active partner in whatever sinister game Evelyn was playing. Chloe began to spy on them. It was incredibly dangerous, but she had nothing left to lose. She would creep down the dark hallway in her socks, pressing her ear against the cold wood of the living room door. She listened to their hushed conversations over the clinking of wine glasses. She learned that Julian was indeed a lawyer, but he specialized in shady real estate deals and finding legal loopholes. One rainy evening, the fragments of their conversation finally snapped together in Chloe's mind, forming a terrifying picture. They weren't talking about Evelyn's ex-husband. They were talking about Grandma Martha's house. The beautiful, cozy little property in Astoria, sitting right on a prime piece of coastal real estate, had been left entirely in Chloe's name in Martha's will. Because Chloe was a minor, Marcus was the legal custodian of the property. But Evelyn was now Marcus's wife, and by legally framing Chloe as an uncontrollable delinquent minor who needed expensive residential treatment, Julian was drawing up paperwork to allow Evelyn to petition for control of the asset. Their plan was pure evil. Julian explained that they needed to build a massive, documented case against Chloe. The stolen money was step 1. The fake police reports would be step 2. They were going to convince Marcus that Chloe needed to be sent away to a strict, out-of-state reform academy. Once she was gone, Evelyn would use the power of attorney she had smoothly convinced Marcus to sign before his voyage to quietly sell the Astoria house to one of Julian's shell companies for a fraction of its worth. They would pocket the cash, fund Brittany's lavish lifestyle, and leave Marcus completely in the dark until it was too late. Chloe felt the blood drain from her face as she crouched in the dark hallway. They were going to steal her grandmother's legacy, the only real home she had ever known, and they were going to lock her away in a facility to do it. The sheer scale of the betrayal was paralyzing. She had to warn her father. She had to make him see the truth, no matter the cost. The next day, Evelyn went to her usual afternoon spa appointment, leaving her phone charging on the kitchen counter. This was the opening Chloe needed. Her hands shaking wildly, Chloe grabbed the phone, locked herself in the bathroom, and dialed the emergency satellite number for Marcus's ship. The line clicked and hissed with heavy static before the gruff voice of the ship's communications officer answered. Chloe practically screamed, begging to be connected to the chief engineer. Minutes that felt like hours ticked by until Marcus finally picked up. Chloe didn't waste a second. Crying hysterically, she dumped everything on him. She told him about the endless chores, the stolen money, the cancelled music lessons. And then, she told him about Julian. She told him about the kissing, the wine, and the terrifying plot to sell Grandma Martha's house in Oregon. She begged him to come home, swearing on her mother's grave that she was telling the exact truth. The line was silent for a long, agonizing moment, save for the crackle of the satellite feed. Marcus didn't believe her. The poison Evelyn had planted in his brain was simply too deep. He sighed heavily, the sound distorted by the digital connection. He told Chloe that her lies were becoming pathological. He explained that Evelyn had already told him that Julian, her lawyer cousin, was coming over to help with her taxes. He accused Chloe of twisting innocent things because she was jealous and angry about being grounded. Chloe felt the world collapse around her. She screamed into the phone, pleading with him to just look closer. But Marcus sternly told her the conversation was over and hung up. Sitting on the cold bathroom tile, Chloe felt completely defeated. The monster had won. But out on the Pacific Ocean, in the noisy, cramped engine control room, Marcus was staring blankly at the receiver. He was angry at his daughter, yes, but a tiny, microscopic seed of doubt had been planted in his gut. Chelsea's voice hadn't sounded angry or rebellious. It had sounded completely, utterly terrified. And Marcus, despite all his flaws, possessed a sharp, analytical mind. That night in his small metal cabin, Marcus couldn't sleep. The rhythmic thumping of the ship's engines couldn't drown out the sheer panic he had heard in his daughter's voice. What if she was telling the truth? The thought made him feel physically sick. He pulled out his laptop and connected to the ship's expensive satellite internet. He couldn't just accuse his wife without proof, but he also couldn't ignore the possibility that his child was in danger. Marcus made a drastic decision. He logged into an online electronics store and purchased a high-end, discreet Wi-Fi security camera. It was designed to look exactly like a standard digital alarm clock. He paid for overnight shipping to the Seattle apartment. But he didn't address the package to Evelyn. Instead, he called his trusted friend Dave, a local electrician who had a key to the apartment for maintenance emergencies. Marcus asked Dave for a massive, secret favor. He needed Dave to intercept the package, enter the apartment under the guise of checking the breaker box while Evelyn was out, and plug the clock in on the living room shelf. The operation went exactly as planned. 2 days later, Dave texted Marcus a simple thumbs-up emoji. The camera was active, connected to the apartment's Wi-Fi router, and completely invisible. It had a wide-angle lens that captured the entire living room, the entrance to the kitchen, and the front door. It also had a highly sensitive built-in microphone. Back on the ship, thousands of miles from the Seattle coastline, Marcus downloaded the secure viewing app onto his laptop. His hands hovered over the trackpad. He felt a deep sense of guilt for spying on his own home, praying that he would log in to find Evelyn peacefully reading a book and Chloe safely doing her homework. He clicked the icon. The screen went black for a moment as it buffered the high-definition feed. Then, the image of his living room materialized on the screen. The guilt instantly evaporated, completely replaced by a freezing, terrifying dread. The scene unfolding in his apartment was worse than anything his worst nightmares could have conjured. Through the crystal-clear feed, Marcus watched as Evelyn marched into the living room, holding a glass of white wine. She was screaming at the top of her lungs. A moment later, Chloe stepped into the frame. The girl looked terrible. She was wearing ragged sweatpants, her hair was a mess, and she looked exhausted and terrified. Evelyn violently shoved a pile of dirty laundry into Chloe's chest. When Chloe mumbled something in response, Evelyn didn't hesitate. She raised her hand and slapped Chloe sharply across the face. The sickening smack echoed clearly through the laptop speakers. Marcus physically recoiled in his chair, his blood running entirely cold. He watched, unable to breathe, as his daughter fell back, clutching her cheek, crying silently. Evelyn pointed a manicured finger in the girl's face, warning her that if the kitchen wasn't spotless in 10 minutes, she would lock her in the closet for the night. Marcus's hands clenched into fists so tight, His knuckles turned bone white. The woman he had married was a monster. Chloe had been telling the absolute truth. But the horrors were just beginning. An hour later on the feed, the front door opened. Julian walked in, shaking the Seattle rain off his expensive umbrella. Evelyn greeted him not with a polite hug, but with a passionate, deeply intimate kiss right in the middle of Marcus's living room. Marcus felt his stomach violently heave. He watched his wife pour her lover a glass of scotch, Marcus's own expensive scotch, and pull him onto the sofa. The microphone picked up every single word of their conversation. Julian unzipped his leather briefcase and pulled out a stack of thick legal documents. He smiled, a greasy, arrogant smirk, and told Evelyn that the petition was ready. He explicitly outlined the entire demonic plan. He explained how Evelyn's newly filed police reports, falsely claiming Chloe was running away and acting violent, would guarantee that the judge would grant her emergency control over the teenager's assets. Julian laughed, noting how easy it was going to be to flip the Astoria property to his offshore LLC. "Your idiot husband won't even know it's gone until he gets back to port," Julian chuckled. Marcus didn't hear anything else. The roaring in his ears completely drowned out the audio feed. He slammed the laptop shut. The sheer magnitude of his failure crashed down on him like a tidal wave. He had abandoned his daughter. He had let a predator into her home. He had called his own flesh and blood a liar to protect a sociopath who was actively plotting to steal his deceased mother's home. The rage that ignited in his chest was unlike anything he had ever felt. It was a cold, calculated, deeply dangerous fury. He grabbed the heavy phone on his desk and dialed the bridge. He ordered the captain to immediately alter the ship's course to the nearest major port, citing an extreme, life-or-death family emergency. When the captain hesitated, citing the millions of dollars in cargo delay fees, Marcus, the chief engineer who held the ship's mechanical life in his hands, made it terrifyingly clear that if the ship didn't turn around, the engines would miraculously fail. The ship altered its course. It took 5 agonizing days to reach the port in Hawaii. Marcus barely slept, barely ate. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the image of Evelyn striking his daughter. During those 5 days, he maintained absolute radio silence with Seattle. He didn't answer Evelyn's sweet, fake text messages. He spent his time communicating with his own lawyers, sending them the saved video clips from the hidden camera. His legal team moved with lightning speed. By the time Marcus stepped off the gangway onto solid ground, the trap was fully set. He booked the first available commercial flight to Seattle. As the plane soared over the Pacific Ocean, Marcus stared out the window at the dark clouds. He wasn't just coming home to file for divorce. He was coming home to completely annihilate the woman who had hurt his child. He was going to burn Evelyn's perfectly constructed world straight to the ground. He just prayed he would get there before Julian filed the final paperwork for the Astoria house. The flight landed in Seattle in the middle of a massive thunderstorm. Marcus didn't bother with his luggage. He walked straight out of the terminal, hailed a taxi, and gave the driver an extra $100 to break every speed limit on the highway. As the cab tore through the rain-slicked city streets, Marcus pulled up the camera feed on his phone one last time. Evelyn was in the living room, packing a suitcase. Julian was standing by the door, looking at his watch. They were getting ready to leave for a weekend getaway, leaving Chloe behind to manage the apartment. The sheer arrogance of it made Marcus's blood boil. He texted his lawyer one word: now. The taxi skidded to a halt outside his luxury apartment building. Marcus threw the cash at the driver and sprinted through the revolving doors. He ignored the doorman, bypassed the elevator and ran up the emergency stairwell, his heavy boots echoing like gunshots against the concrete. With every step, the image of his daughter's terrified face pushed him faster. Which brings us back to this very moment. The flashing police lights reflecting in the window. Evelyn crying her fake tears, trying to convince the officers that Chloe was an uncontrollable runaway. The trap had been set, but Evelyn had no idea who she was dealing with. Just as the police officer reached out to grab Chloe's arm, the heavy deadbolt on the apartment door clicked. The door flew open with such violent force that it smashed against the wall, splintering the drywall. Marcus stood in the doorway, soaked in rain, breathing heavily, looking like an absolute force of nature. The room went dead silent. Evelyn dropped her silk handkerchief. Her jaw fell open in absolute shock. Julian, who had been hiding in the kitchen, slowly backed away. Chloe gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "You're supposed to be in Asia," Evelyn stammered, her voice shaking violently. Her perfect facade instantly shattered. She tried to recover, stepping forward with open arms. "Oh, honey, thank God you're home. Chloe has been completely out of control." Marcus didn't let her finish. He completely ignored his wife. He walked straight past her, his eyes locked on his daughter. He knelt down in front of Chloe, pulling her into an embrace so tight and fiercely protective that it knocked the breath out of her. He buried his face in her shoulder, and for the first time in his adult life, Marcus began to cry. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking with immense pain. "I am so sorry. I know everything. I saw everything." Chloe collapsed against him, sobbing hysterically into his wet jacket. The nightmare was finally over. Her dad had come back for her. Marcus stood up, keeping Chloe safely tucked behind his broad shoulders. He turned his attention back to Evelyn and the two completely confused police officers. He didn't yell, he didn't scream. His voice was terrifyingly calm. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out his phone, and handed it directly to the lead officer. "Officers," Marcus said clearly, "I'd like to press charges for child abuse, grand theft, and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. And here is the video evidence of all of it." The colour completely drained from Evelyn's face as the officer pressed play on the video. The sickening sound of the slap echoed through the room, followed immediately by the audio of Julian explicitly outlining their criminal plot to steal the Oregon property. Julian made a desperate break for the door, but the second officer tackled him to the hardwood floor, snapping handcuffs onto his wrists. Evelyn began to scream, thrashing wildly as the police read her Miranda rights. She cursed Marcus, she cursed Chloe, her true, ugly nature fully exposed for the entire world to see. Marcus stood tall, his arm wrapped securely around his daughter, watching coldly as his wife and her lover were dragged out of his home in handcuffs. The apartment, once a prison, finally felt like it belonged to them again. Marcus looked down at Chloe, wiping a tear from her cheek. "Go pack your bags, kiddo," he smiled softly, the heavy weight finally lifting from his shoulders. "We're going back to Astoria. I'm done with the ocean. It's time to go home." Evelyn and Julian were sentenced to federal prison for a laundry list of charges, including fraud and child endangerment. Brittany was sent to live with her biological father, completely cut off from the luxurious life she felt entitled to. Marcus permanently resigned from his deep-sea contracts. He kept his promise. He and Chloe packed up their lives in that cold Seattle apartment and moved permanently back to Grandma Martha's cozy house in Astoria. Marcus found a local job managing the port, finally putting his family above his career. He bought Chloe a beautiful new Martin acoustic guitar, and the sound of music finally filled their home once again. They spent their evenings sitting on the front porch, the smell of the Pacific Ocean breeze mingling with the sound of Chloe's playing, finally at peace. Thank you so much for watching this incredible story of betrayal and justice. If you were on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more crazy true-to-life stories, and leave a comment below. We want to hear from you. What would you have done if you saw that footage on the hidden camera? Let us know down in the comments.